David, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course, happy to be here.
So you are a grand mentor for our feature competition, and I'd love to just dive into a little bit about your process. But I always like to start with, what was that moment, or what was the thing that really made you realize that you wanted to pursue this industry and pursue this craft? I always love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, I guess there
Taking
were a
you back to
few.
the early days.
What'd you say?
I was like taking you back to the early days.
Yeah, right. It's a good question. I think there were a few moments, because first, I think before you decide to pursue something like screenwriting, you have to be into movies first, right? That's usually the first thing. And so it was that, I think it was seeing stuff like Jurassic Park, when I was in like first grade, you know, and
Yeah,
just the idea of just like going to the movie theater and being enveloped in that it's just I remember just going to the movie theater for movies like that and it just being such like an intense experience, that I
yeah.
wanted to return to. And then I guess separately, I got into writing, maybe around the same time when I was in elementary school and I started writing short stories. And I
Oh, nice.
remember writing in school, and when I got to write creative writing, short stories, it didn't even feel like it was schoolwork. It didn't feel like it was school at all, it just
Yeah.
felt fun. Um so it was almost the elements of screenwriting are, you know screen movies and then writing, which is writing. And I think I got interested in both of those separately. Sorry, there's a dog. Is that getting into the audio?
I didn't. I didn't.
No?
I
Okay,
think
cool.
your mic is like
My
doing
mic
a good
is
job.
isolating it. Great. Okay, glad I got this. So yeah, I mean, I basically I was interested in both of those elements separately. And then it was around, I was probably 15, 16 when I really into movies in the sense where you sort of go beyond what is, I guess, being marketed to your generation. Uh Look at the classic films or foreign films, independent films. And then around that time, I was still interested in writing, and I kind of had this revelation, where it's like, well, making a movie or a video with your friends, which I had started to do, it was really fun, but it took a lot. It took a lot of time. It took other people writing. If you want to write a movie or write anything, it's just you. And all you need is a computer, or not even a computer, just a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen. And so that really appealed to me. And so it was, yeah, I don't think it was one moment, but it was a series of those kind of like mini revelations.
Yeah. So I mean, you've been like a storyteller for a long time. You've been telling stories since you were a kid. That's really cool. And a movie lover, which of course I always feel like you got to be at least a little bit of a cinephile if you really want to be serious about, writing or really doing
Yeah,
anything in the industry. So I'd love
yeah.
to hear that. I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, I just kind of find it interesting. Like, what was it like when you started working on your first screenplay? Like, how did you even go about learning, how to even learn format and stuff? Because I'm sure some of that could still apply to people who are, just starting out with their journey with screenwriting. Like, what was that like? How did you really start learning it in the first place?
Uh, so I wrote my first feature script when I was 16 years old. Um, I used Microsoft Word to format.
Oh, wow.
Uh, so yeah, a lot of tabs. I didn't even like format it right, so it was pretty terribly formatted. It was also terrible, just in general. I thought it was lost for a while, and then I found a floppy disk that I might have saved it on, and I had to get a floppy disk player, that you can plug into a Mac. Finding it, and I maybe I got through like 5 pages before, I was just cringing so hard. Um, but Yeah, there were some, not as many resources as there are right now, but there were resources out there online, and just like most art, when people are starting to do it, I was just sort of imitating stuff that I liked, you know, um, uh, stuff like, I was a I was a teenager. I like Tarantino, still like Tarantino, but like Tarantino or
Pulp Fiction's better on it.
oh, there you go. Look, and actually Pulp Fiction was actually the first script that I ever read. Remember when I was
Oh, wow.
Googling screenwriting, that like popped up immediately. So I'm like, I should
That's a great
that would
first
be
one to read.
right. Yeah. And that was kind of amazing because when you read it, it almost feels like you're watching the movie, which is kind of the point. What the goal of, when you write a script. Um, so I was, and stuff like The Godfather. I was just imitating, um, and I wrote it and I finished it. I'm glad I finished it, and I knew it was bad. That's the one thing I can say. I knew it was bad, but it didn't really discourage me. I think I just felt like, okay, I did that. Now I'll write the next one. And sorry.
So that's just a great mindset to have. Like I've kind of realized a lot of people in our community get really discouraged, after their first script, but that's definitely a common factor I see in people who are successful is like that self-awareness, to keep going, even though you might not think it was where you wanted it to be.
Absolutely. It's always, every script is a stepping stone to something else, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like anything. If you're, learning guitar, you're not gonna be Jimi Hendrix, when you're, just sitting down to learn scales. You know, it takes that practice. All it is practice. And then eventually, you might get to a place where it's not just practice, it's something that you feel is worthwhile. But that the number of scripts is different for everyone. And it's very,
yeah,
very rare that your first few are going to be, something that's, that will be at that level.
for sure. I'd love to talk. I mean, there's a couple things, but maybe like out of just for the screenwriters who are like really just getting started in our community who might see this, like what do you think is like the best thing that they should keep in mind, or like one good tip that you have to really start learning the craft? I know you said like you read screenplays, of course, that's always like a huge one, but like is there any kind of specific tip that you give someone who's just now maybe starting to write their first screenplay?
Hmm. Well, okay. One simple tip is finish it. Finish your
Yeah,
script. A lot of people, and myself included, they start things and then they kind of get discouraged, um, because that initial spark that was very exciting to you, it fades, and that kind of happens no matter who you are on pretty much every project. Um, Push through, get to the end, tight fade out. There's some sort of, I think, psychological benefit to getting, as opposed to, I'd rather have one completed script than five, half-written scripts, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So, and yeah, it's, it might not be good. It's just, it's one of those things of just give yourself the benefit, give yourself permission for it not to be good. You don't have to show anyone this draft. You can rewrite it. You can put it in a drawer. Just finish it. Get to fade out.
I love that. That's a great like soundbite right there. Honestly, that's really good advice. I love it. And it's also really validating to hear you say that they're like even no matter what, there's going to be those times where you start to feel discouraged about your script. That's definitely something a lot of beginning writers, including myself, like that's something definitely we struggle with. So yeah, I appreciate that, man. That's so good to hear. And then okay, I definitely want to hear like about how you really started to get momentum in your career, but I'd like to talk a little bit about your process since we kind of are on
Yep.
first screenwriter and first screenplays. Like, what is like? I guess a good place to start is how do you even come up with ideas? Like, what is that process like when you kind of really land on an idea that you realize this is something I want to work on?
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess, right now we're talking about original ideas that would be, become feature specs, or maybe, a spec pilot for a TV series, as opposed to, when you're working professionally, you might be brought on to work on somebody else's project, producer, director, studio. So yeah, for an original idea, I'll be honest, I have no good process for generating ideas, really. Like, I don't know if I ever sort of sit down and, block out an hour to sort of idea generate. It's a little bit more, I would say, something that is out there that you just have to train yourself to catch when it presents
Mm,
itself to you. Um, Honestly, a lot of times it will happen from just taking in other things. Um, Reading the news. Um, you know, sometimes honestly like watching movies, which is something that we do anyway. Like, just these things, your mind makes connections. I mean, sometimes movie ideas happen because you hear about a movie and you think, oh, it's about this, and you find out that it's actually something different. But then the thing you thought it was about, you're like, actually, that actually sounds like a good idea, you know? I don't
yeah.
know if and well, honestly, also just like living your life, you'll often just be in situations that will just inspire something. Maybe you'll meet someone who has an interesting story, or you'll meet someone who's like, that's an interesting character. If we took that character and put them in this situation, what would happen? So yeah, so it's I don't think it's not like an active process. It's more of just like I guess an observational process. You just sort of want to be open to it.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, you said something that's actually like a really amazing way to think about it at the beginning. You said like training yourself to catch those ideas when they come, which I think is really, really good advice. Like awareness, like kind of like you said, being open. It's like kind of Lynchian. You know how David Lynch talks about it's like
Yep.
getting ideas is like catching a fish. Like it's
Yep.
definitely similar to that. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. That's awesome. And then okay, process wise. So, I guess this could go for when you are collaborating on a screenplay or working on something original. Like, do you have a process? Do you have like a routine? Like, what does that kind of look like? Like when you have maybe a good day of writing, what does that look like? And then maybe a bad day of writing, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends at what stage you're in. I guess we could probably divide it into maybe three major, no, let's say four major stages of an idea. The first one we'll just call maybe like the brainstorming idea, like blue sky, anything. It's not even anything concrete yet. You're just sort of coming up with general ideas for the specific idea. The second phase is outline, um, where you're organizing those ideas into a very specific structure. The third phase is the writing phase, and then the fourth phase is the rewriting phase. You could probably combine those two into the general writing phase if you want. Um, so yeah, whether or not it's a successful day for me probably depends on what phase I'm in. If it's the writing phase, usually a successful day, you can be generally it's pretty quantitative. How many pages? But no, it's not just quantitative, because you can write, 10 pages and just not feel good about them. And you sort of know, oh, this feels good, or not good. For the outline phase, um, a lot of outlining is just solving problems. And if I've had a
Mm,
successful day, it's that I've either, laid a sufficient amount of track, in this story, or I've like solved at least one pressing problem in this story, you know. Um,
gotcha.
in the first phase, that's kind of a little bit more quantitative. because I try to make it so that like uh I can just sort of vomit ideas at that stage, and like not all of them are going to be good, but like the bad ideas kind of lead to the good ideas. So yeah, that first one is it's just about the quantity. And then yeah, the rewriting phase, it's a little trickier to quantify because you're in a lot of cases you're not writing new pages. Sometimes you are, but a lot of times you're just trying to fix something that already exists. And yeah, maybe I'd relate that more to the outlining phase. It's just like rewriting is a lot of solving problems. So it's like have
Yeah.
I properly solved problems? And then the bad days are just like the inverse of all of that. You know, just not coming up with ideas, not laying track in the outline, not getting those pages done, not solving problems in the rewrite. You know, and
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
just sometimes you have good ones and sometimes you have bad ones.
Do you have like a routine, like a rigid route? I've interviewed like so there's kind of a divided, there's kind of a divide where I've interviewed people who are like rigid routine every single day, and then other people who are kind of like they go with the flow. They go with when they're really in a good emotional state to write. Do you have a routine? Or are you more like a little bit free flowing with it?
I wish I had a routine. Maybe I should have a routine. I don't. The only semblance of a routine usually is, well, I think part of it is because I my schedule kind of differs from day to day, so it's hard to get into that. Every day that I'm intending to write, which is most days, all I want to do is at some point try to get into that flow state. That's the goal. If there's any sort of routine, that's it. It's like sitting down and trying to get there. And sometimes I get there and sometimes I don't. And when I get there, the chances of it being a good writing day, as we're talking about, go up exponentially. If I don't get into that, yeah, sometimes you can sort of just muscle through and you can still kind of get you know, the work done, but it's going to take longer. It's not going to be as fun. And the work isn't going to be as
Do
good.
you have do you have any tips on getting into that flow state? I mean, like
Yeah.
what you're talking about, most of my days are muscling through and it sucks. So like, you have any tips on like getting that momentum? Like how do you get that momentum? How do you get into that flow state?
Ugh.
It's kind of a philosophical question too. There's not really an
Yeah,
answer to that.
yeah. It's that's a tough one. My best advice for that is really boring, and it has nothing to do with writing. It's just daily habits, which is uh get enough sleep, eat well, exercise, like the normal things that you want to do for health. That, at least for me, usually translates into having a better chance of getting into that flow state.
Now, it's solid advice. That is something that the discipline is really important. And then quickly, I would just like to hear a little bit about outlining because that's something that comes up
Yeah.
all the time in our community. People have a ton of questions about outlining, and also there's of course kind of again there's like the divide of people who don't really outline and people who do. What is that like? How do you kind of approach outlining? Like, what is your process like there? Do you have like page limit? Do you have any just kind of tips and tricks for outlining?
So, I outline a lot. When I'm writing something on my own, I'll outline, but I write with a writing partner. My writing partner Charlie and I, we have to outline because we're literally splitting up, the outline to write. So we have to know what the other person is writing. And also that means that our outlines tend to be pretty detailed. Um, and it's also, it's in some ways it's kind of doing the hard work first so that you can kind of do the easier work of the writing because you figured stuff out. It doesn't always work that way because, of course, writing in itself can be very difficult. Also, I don't think we've ever like written an outline that stayed like that's how like it always changes. Like we'll even when we start writing, sometimes we'll go back to the outline and change things. That's just the nature of it. Um, in terms of tricks, and it's funny, I'm currently working on an outline. So this is a very relevant to my current working life. Um, First of all, it it's going to be hard. And at some points, you could probably say it's the hardest part of writing a feature is the outline. So I think sort of just being okay with like, yeah, this can be very hard. What I generally like to do is look at things from like say like a 50,000 foot view of first act, second act A, second act B, and third act. So divided into four pieces, and then sometimes midpoint in between A and B of the second act. And kind of lay out the major things that should or could happen in each of those parts of it of the script. But also, I think you can sort of get stuck in the 50,000 foot view. It's sometimes a little bit too abstract. So we like to kind of go back and forth between that and the super zoomed in view. When it's feeling too abstract, we'll go in and be super granular on, okay, what are these very specific scenes or even specific moments or specific lines that we want to see in this. And that kind of goes back to that first phase I was talking about, like the brainstorming, and that it all sort of, kind of melds together. Once you start pinpointing some of those individual scenes and moments that you really want, you can start kind of throwing that also into the stew of the outline. And then you have to do the, sometimes tricky work of connecting it all, Another thing that I'll do when I get stuck is just go completely linear. Because a lot of at least my outline work is I'm jumping around. Oh, third act. Oh, this is a moment in the third act. Oh, well, that kind of works kind of like maybe second act, around page 65 or whatever. When that hits a dead end, going super linear of, okay, first scene, what do we want here? Okay, that leads into second scene. What happens here? That leads into, so being very, very causal there. And it's like,
Gotcha.
so it's a complete mishmash, and it's a very messy process because it's like I don't know, a piece of marble that you're like hitting for a sculpture. You're like hitting it in all parts of it, and you're using different mallets, big ones, small ones, and you're just trying to like wrestle this thing. And yeah, it's tough and it's messy, and sometimes you're really impatient because you want to get to the writing, which is not a bad thing, because it's like, to want to write. I mean, we're writers. That's what we want to do. But pretty much without fail, having done the work of doing a detailed outline just front loads the work in a way that when you get into the writing, you're very happy that you did all that work up front.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I love that. I mean, I think that's such a great way to think about it. I think that's something that a lot of writers kind of fear a little bit with outlines, is they might feel like they're going to get stuck in like a rigid thing. But like I said, you get a lot of work done up front, and it's flexible. It's not like you got to stick to this thing like it's set in stone.
That is a thing that I'll say, and I understand that, of like someone, and if someone's process is, if they work better without an outline, great, because that does work for some people. But I always say, like, you just, it's not rigid. It's never rigid. Even when you want it to be rigid, it's not rigid. It's going to change. So yeah, I don't think I think committing to an outline will coexist with a process that's a little bit more free flowing.
Definitely. Okay, so this interview is flying by. This is awesome. This is great. It's flying by. Can you just tell me, like, I'd love to hear a little bit about like how you really started breaking into this industry. Like going from that being 16 years old, working on that first feature you didn't like what were those moments or what were those times when you really started to see some success? And then if you have any advice for anyone who's trying to break in, trying to get their work seen, like I'd love to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, our story is it's kind of wild and not something that can be replicated, which I guess is true for most people. But we were, we sort of benefited from a series of serendipitous events. Essentially, I was writing uh, scripts on my own, and my writing partner Charlie was also writing scripts on his own. We've known each other, you know, uh, we go way back, same friend group in high school, and he moved to LA a couple years before I did. I was in New York for a few years working in news, and when I moved out, we decided, hey, let's we've been writing separately, let's join forces and try to write together. And so the first thing we wrote was a pilot, and that was sort of the test case. Can we work together? And we were able to write something that uh, worked. I mean, the process worked, and we thought that the pilot was decent enough that we can move on to the next thing. And the next thing was, I guess this kind of goes back to what we were talking about of sort of being uh, observant and open to stuff. My writing partner uh, had uh, seen that there was this memoir that Ron Stallworth had written about his time in the Colorado Springs Police Department in the 70s, and thought it was very interesting, and read it, and I read it, and we thought, oh, maybe there's something there. So we just reached out to Ron and talked with him, and we found out that he'd been sort of trying to get it made into a movie, and we thought, this is a movie. We're all on the same page here. And he'd been trying to get it into Hollywood's hands, but as we all know, doesn't always work out for a million reasons. So we thought, hey, let's the three of us, let's join forces and give this a shot. We presented our creative ideas to him on how we would adapt the story into a film, and he was on board. And my writing partner had worked as an assistant in the industry for a bit, so we knew some people. And we worked on the script, and as we were working on the script, my writing partner mentioned it. It was like a literal elevator pitch to this producer named Sean Reddick, and Sean brought us in to pitch it, and we in a panic came up with a 15-minute pitch, which is also it was a little weird because it was essentially we were writing a spec. It wasn't a pitch that we were trying to sell. I think we were just basically we were pitching with the goal of not for Sean to buy it, but for him to just read the script, because at the time, we didn't have any reps or anything, and we were far from professional. So we pitched it. He said, great, when the script is done, send it to me, because this is what he said, and this was in 2015. He said, me and my partners happened to be working with Jordan Peele on his first movie, this thing that was going to be called Get Out. And he said, Jordan might be a good fit for this project. And we said, great. So we finished the script. We were happy with it. Ron was happy with it. We gave it to Sean, and Sean gave it to Jordan. And Jordan became a producer on it. And so suddenly our yeah, well, you can see how the serendipity happened, because this started happening in 2016. Basically, the hopes for this project were sort of riding on how well Jordan's debut film as a director was going to go. So we're really crossing our fingers. We're hoping that people come out, to see this movie called Get Out. Well, of course, it came out in early 2017 and was, sleeper hit of the year, really. And not just in a financial sense, but in a cultural sense too. And so, Jordan sort of overnight became the most sought after filmmaker in Hollywood, and we were his next project. So and then Jordan connected it, called up Spike, and and it just sort of went from there.
Dude, that's insane. Like that's
Yeah,
how does that you ever sit back and just think about like how insane that is? Like that's
all the time,
amazing. Like,
all the time. Yeah,
like
yeah, it was nuts. It was nuts. It was nuts. And when it was just me, Charlie, and Ron working on it, we had no idea that any of this would happen, obviously.
yeah. But I mean, like, so I know, like you said, a lot of serendipitous, just like, it's hard. You can't really quantify like how that kind of thing happens. But do you have any advice? Like, once you get into rooms, even and pitching and talking with people, like, do you have any advice for us who are like, just we're not even close to being there yet, but like what should we keep in mind when we start to get some momentum, when we start to get into rooms or when we start to approach people for pitching and stuff?
Hmm.
Whatever y'all did worked, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's a few things. I mean, one thing is just what we've been talking about, which is be on the lookout for things that if it's a movie that you want to see. I mean, this is actually kind of this is literal advice that Jordan Peele has given about writing Get Out. He said, "I wrote my favorite movie that didn't exist yet." You know, if you can see an idea and like you see the movie and you're like I like you see it in your head and you're like I really like this or love this movie, it doesn't exist, like that's probably in a good place. It's sort of a gut thing, which and it's tough because this is a business where you really need to get other people on board with your vision unless you're self-financing it. um yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, in terms of pitching, we came up with that 15-minute pitch. We'd never pitched before. Um, all we did was practice it like nonstop, like so many times. And it was very nerve-wracking going in there to give that pitch because and pitching is always even now there it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but especially the first time you do it. So fall back on the thing you can control, which is the preparation. you know um uh yeah, and then I don't know. Yeah, our specific story, it is a little bit hard to give advice because it's such a unique thing, and it was just sort of a confluence of these lucky events and everything. But it did sort of come down to collaboration, and it none of this would have worked if me, Charlie, and Ron hadn't gotten along from the beginning and incorporated. We gave our ideas to him very upfront, and then he gave his ideas to us, and we, every step of the way, outline, first draft, second draft, we sent to Ron and got feedback, extensive feedback from him, and we took it. Just being open to that level of collaboration, egoless collaboration with your partners, and sometimes your employers, is extremely important.
I was actually going to ask you a little bit about collaboration, but you kind of really gave some great advice there, like egoless. That's such a great way to think about it. Seems like that's a problem. Like that's kind of a core problem all the time in this industry. Of course, is ego, letting your ego get the best of you. By the way, for anyone watching, he's talking about BlacKKlansman, which Academy Award
Sorry.
2018.
Yeah, I didn't mention the title
No,
of the film.
it's amazing. It's just like that's just an amazing story. Like congratulations, man. You're like really one of your beginning scripts won an Academy Award. Spike Lee, like it's insane. That's amazing.
It is, yes,
I
it's
mean,
insane.
and then so did you like was Spike Lee? Did he collaborate at all with y'all on the writing process at any point? Like when he came on board, like what was that like with him working with him? Like, do you have any cool stories with
We
Spike Lee?
we passed off the script to Spike and his writing partner Kevin Wilmot, and they did rewrites to our script. And now the final film, the four of us, me, Charlie, Kevin, and Spike, are credited as writers. So we didn't, and it's a very typical thing, especially for feature writers to, you work on the project, and then the next writer or writers come in, and you essentially hand the baton off. So that, yeah, there was no collaboration in that sense. We were essentially, we wrote our draft, we passed it off, and then we heard about these things that were happening, and then we saw the film, which was pretty surreal.
That must have been amazing seeing that thing in the theater for the first time. I can't even imagine that. That must have been amazing.
Oh, it was, well, we found out that the movie got into Cannes. Um, uh, I guess, well, Cannes is right. It's mid-May right now as we're recording this. So Cannes I think is happening currently, or is about to happen. Uh,
I'm sure.
yeah. Um, so that would have been, it's 2024. So okay, 6 years ago. 2018 Cannes is, yeah, is that's where the premiere was. And so
And that's the first time you saw it was
that was
at
the first
Cannes.
time. Yeah, in that big theater with, like, there's 1,000 people there, and yeah, it was wild. Uh,
That's so cool.
yeah, yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, Cannes is
Congratulations.
obviously. What'd you say?
I was like, congratulations, man. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it was really cool. It's also, Cannes very fancy. You have to wear you have to rent a tux for it, to see, for us it was we were kind of out of our element a little bit, but uh yeah, hey, a piece of advice: if you have a chance to see a movie that you wrote at Cannes, I'd go. That's a piece of advice.
So, okay, this has been a great interview. We went a little over, but this flew by. I'd love to chat again sometime. But this was awesome. But we are so one final question, and this is I'll forewarn you. This is just a question that we're kind of putting in all of these interviews. But I don't. There's not really a way to answer it per se. Like it's one of those kind of questions that's like can't really give a solid answer. But whatever, however you want to go with it. So the question is, especially today, there's a lot of challenges in this industry. Things have changed a lot in the past few years in this industry. Like with all the challenges today and just streaming and everything that's going on, what advice would you give someone who is just determined to actually get their work seen, to actually get their work produced? Like what advice, like, and of course, again, there's not like one answer to that, but I guess what I'm asking is if you had to boil things down to like one piece of advice, what would that one piece of
Mm,
advice be?
okay. Well, this is tricky because, the person I'm giving advice to, and the hypothetical person who in these tough times wants to get their work produced, that person is me also. I think we're all affected by this, except, maybe people who are at the very top. But, for me, me and my writing partner, I consider us just, sort of working screenwriters. So this is absolutely affected us and our peers. Um, who I don't. Well, okay. I'll give the advice that I usually give. I don't know if the state of the industry changes that, but the sweet spot seems to be, you know, write something that's high concept and low budget. But I want to be clear. High concept doesn't necessarily mean that it's like this, you know, big kind of genre, blockbuster thing. I think because people write all types of movies. I think within the type of movie that you write, find something that has a hook in it. And that hook can be, so many things. Hook could be like an interesting character, but just something that when you're describing the movie to people, whether they're in the industry or not, they immediately go, "Oh, that's a movie." So that's the concept part, and then the low budget part. It just that relates to producibility. And low
Yeah.
budget means different things to different people. Some for some people it's under 10 million. Some people it's under 5 million. Some people it's under 1 million. Uh, it should be something that if a producer or some um someone with decision making, a decision maker uh sees it, they you basically want to make it harder for them to say no. Everyone's default answer in Hollywood, for good reason, is no, because there's so much risk anytime you say yes to something.
Yeah.
Um, but if we move toward more producible, lower budget stuff that still has a hook, and when I say hook, I mean I'm kind of essentially saying like a marketing hook, like something that can be marketed, because this is a business. You're going to up your chances for your thing to get momentum. It's not a perfect way of going about things, because there will always be things that are outliers that don't fit into that paradigm, and there will also be things that are a higher budget that will work, which is great. But just for someone who's uh still, doesn't isn't professional yet, or is professional but is hasn't had anything produced, or in our case, we've had one thing produced but we're looking for the next thing. um a hook with producibility is feels like the best formula for success.
That's great advice. That's really solid advice. Like, it can, I think a lot of people starting out sometimes don't think about it, that this is a business, and what you're trying to write you need to be able to articulate it in a way that gets people interested. And we forget about that sometimes. I think that's great advice. That's really good advice.
Yeah, it is kind of, because we're, as screenwriters, sometimes we're sort of isolated and we're sort of working, on our own thing, forgetting that if everything goes great on with the thing that we're working on, it's going to be out there in the world, and it's going to be on billboards, and it's going to be a trailer in front of a movie in an AMC, or it's going to be a 30-second spot on TV or something like that. And it's kind of it should be something where that can be communicated in that amount of time and make people interested and make people want to go to see that movie. So we always, my writing partner and I always sort of we take that into consideration when we're starting
Yeah.
any new project.
Great advice, man. I appreciate it. And then, okay, one more question. Just a quick question. What movies are you looking forward to in the next couple of years? Is there anything on your radar right now that you're really excited to see?
Oh, well, it's out already, but I've heard Fall Guy is good. I haven't seen that yet. Looking forward to seeing that. And
Sure. I
Furiosa.
saw him.
Yeah, you saw that?
So excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, All Guy was good. Definitely really good. Furiosa probably is. I don't know. Megalopolis is up there for me just
I
because.
I just saw the
You know,
just saw the teaser for that. That looks really cool. Obviously going to, yeah, Furiosa, and yeah, Megalopolis. Like, there's cool stuff, but then there's also, every year there's like stuff that seems to come out of nowhere, or maybe if you're paying
definitely.
attention you'll know about it. But a lot of times for me, like, I guess it's stuff that's completely under the radar, and then it just shows up, and then people are saying that it's great. So yeah, just looking forward to seeing the version of those
Yeah.
this year, also.
You know what I just heard? That I literally just heard about this, but I don't know if you've heard about this yet. But I'm telling everyone about it. Aaron
What?
Sorkin is working on a script that's kind of like a sequel to Social Network. It's not
Oh,
technically an exact sequel, but he's writing a movie that is dealing with Facebook and January 5th and the influence of Facebook on the campaign and everything. and he's really solidly working on that script right now. And I'm like, oh,
Interesting.
that sounds really interesting. That's crazy. Maybe
Yeah.
David Fincher will work that one too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, Social Network, it's a great movie. So yeah, that's
well, this was
cool.
great, man. This was great. I really appreciate your time, and there's a lot of really good stuff in here. Like I said, I feel inspired after this, so I love doing these interviews. So yeah, I really appreciate it, man.
Of course. Yeah.